Hey guys, Brian here from Starlite. I hope everybody's well out there. Today on the Pulpcast, we have author Rob Hart, and he's got a new one here coming out at the end of June called the Medusa Protocol, kind of in the Assassins Anonymous world. So Rob, how you doing today, man?
Doing good. Doing good. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is the second book in the series. Do we want to call it a series?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just submitted the third book to my editor, so yeah,
Excellent.
we're a full blown series now.
Full-blown series. Okay. So talk to me then about give kind of an elevator pitch for the Medusa Protocol, what readers can expect in it, and where it kind of picks up after Assassins Anonymous.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the Assassins Anonymous universe is basically a world where you've got a 12-step recovery program for killers, and in the Medusa Protocol, we are following Astrid, who is a member of the home group who gets kidnapped, thrown into a black site prison. She has no idea why. She's trying to get out. Her friends are trying to get to her, and a whole lot of things go wrong in the process.
Okay, good. And so so first off, the whole concept, the idea of the kind of a emotional support group, if you will, like you mentioned, the 12-step group for murderers or assassins. Uh, when I first heard about it, my first thought was two things. My first thought was one, um, John Wick probably would have joined that before his
Yeah.
dog,
Yep.
obviously. And and the second thing is it reminds me of the interplay in Fight Club with those emotional support groups that the main characters are always going to. And so where did the idea stem from for the whole idea for Assassins Anonymous?
I mean, I love the assassin genre, I guess subgenre really, because it's such a fun moral gray area to play in, and I for the longest time I wanted to do something with like a bunch of assassins in like a group therapy type setting where you've got like a hitter from the Yakuza and like a clandestine government agency and all these different organizations, and it was percolating in the back of my head, like as most things do, until there was that moment where it clicked when I thought about it in terms of the recovery process, because the recovery process is a great container for telling a story because you've got steps, but you've also got an amends process. And I'm like, what does an amends process look like for someone like this? And that was the question that was like, okay, yeah, no, I think I got a book here now. And I kind of peaked, like Assassin's Anonymous. It's like it's perfect title. It says exactly what it is.
Mhm.
I'm never going to do any better than that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I read somewhere, did the Spielberg production group pick these up?
Yeah, yeah. Amblin optioned it. It was nuts the way that process happened. So usually the way it works is like you sell a book to a publisher, and then I have a film and TV agent, and she goes around and starts passing it around to people in Hollywood saying, hey, who's interested?
Right.
And I've had experience in that realm where like I've done things where I've gotten like a couple of bites, and like when I did The Warehouse, like a bunch of people were interested in that. But this went viral in such a big way because she never sent it to anybody. Like there were book scouts who were reading it for like foreign presses.
Uh-huh.
Someone passed it to someone in Hollywood, and all of a sudden it starts getting passed around to everyone, and her phone starts ringing off the hook, and she's like, "I like, what is going on?" To the point where there were people calling her saying like, "Hey, we're interested," and she was like, "Look, I'm sorry, but you're not even big enough to make an offer at this point." It was just absolutely absurd, and when Amblin and Spielberg came in, it was kind of like, oh well, I guess that's the end of that conversation.
Right.
But they're working on the script right now. They just I can't say who, but they attached a director who
Uh-huh.
is really really great. Like because it was never the plan for Spielberg to direct.
Uh-huh.
He was going to be the producer, and they bring someone on, and the person they brought on, if it works out, great. He's a great choice for it. So
Okay.
yeah, man, it's the Hollywood stuff is weird because it's
Yeah.
there's so much enthusiasm and everyone's like, yeah, 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 we're gonna do this, and then one day it all just disappears.
Oh,
So
all the time. Yeah.
yeah,
I grew up in LA and I have multiple members of my family in the
Oh
industry.
God, yeah.
Yeah, it's there's I'm knocking on wood for you. So I don't mean it that way, but it's one of those things where, projects the amount of projects that never quite make it to fruition is insane. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
so but what so are they doing a have you found out are they doing a movie or a series?
It would be for a movie. Like they're
It'd
looking at
be
it as
okay.
like a film franchise, which, would be great,
Of
but we'll
course.
see how it goes.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. That must have been a surreal experience.
So the weird like I the just the absolute craziest part was so the woman at Amblin, Lauren Abrams, who is like the production person or something who was handling the deal. We had a meeting over Zoom, and we were just chatting about the book because at that point, like I was meeting with a couple of people, and at one point she says like, yeah, and I had a long conversation with Steven about this last night, and he really loves it. And I was like, you need to give me a second because it's hard for me to receive that in any kind of cool or collected way.
Right.
Like, are you kidding me?
Right.
So, Steven Spielberg knows about the Goofy book that I wrote.
Right.
Come on, like, there's no better life.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. That's awesome, right? When there's a somebody out there who's a hero or an icon or something like that, and you realize that they know your art exists, it's like, what?
Yeah, yeah, it's weirdly bizarre. Like years ago, out of nowhere, Stephen King just tweeted about like reading The Warehouse and liking it. And it's just one of those moments where you kind of sit there and you're like, this is weird. Like, do we live in a simulation? Like, what is going on?
Right, totally. Totally. So, okay, so then you told me earlier that or you mentioned earlier that the third book has already been completed, right?
Yes.
But you've got the Assassins Anonymous world, you've got the Ash McKenna series, and then you've
Yep.
got a number of standalone pieces. So, uh, is it fair to say that at this point you are kind of streamlining the Assassins Anonymous world, or are you still able to kind of jump around and do other stuff if you wanted to?
I mean, that's literally the meeting that I need to have with my editor next week when she's in New York for Thriller Fest. So after the third Assassins book, I've got one more book in my contract with Putnam. So we have to have that conversation of like, how does this look? Like, do the sales dictate like that we can have a fourth book? There's also a little part of me that's like, I wouldn't mind putting this series, not to bed, but let it rest for a couple of minutes. And like,
Mhm.
because I've got a couple of standalones that I would
Sure.
like to work on.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that like the market will slightly dictate the path I take. But I'm working on a whole other series, which is with Jeff Rake, who is the showrunner and creator of the TV show Manifest, where we're doing like a sci-fi series, and the first book's coming out in January. I'm working on the second one now. It's definitely two books, possibly going to be three, and after that, we're going to kind of see where it goes. But so yeah, it's weird because after the Ash books, I was like, I am never writing a series again. Because by the
Uh,
time you get to the third, fourth, fifth book, it's like you're inviting people to a Tupperware party.
mhm.
I mean, like I love writing them because it's really fun sticking with a character in a world and like
Yeah.
watching it like blossom and grow. But it's sometimes hard to get readers to follow you. So I was like, I wrote The Warehouse, I wrote The Paradox Hotel. I'm like, yeah, like I'm gonna blow up my sandbox and walk away and go do something else. Never again. And now I'm writing two series. So I mean, what do I know?
Right. Okay, cool. So I want to ask you a couple questions, specifically about the Medusa Protocol and specifically from a writing perspective, right?
Yep.
So there are kind of two protagonists in this, right?
Yeah.
Fair to say that. And so you've got Mark and you've got Astrid, um, and I found something interesting because for those obviously you haven't seen the book yet, it jumps chapter to chapter, so it'll say one chapter will say Mark, and then the next Astrid, and it kind of switches back and forth. But throughout all of it, you're in first person. So whether you're writing as Astrid or writing as Mark, you're first person the whole time. Obviously, that was a conscious choice, but there are like James Lee Burke, for example, when he writes like the Dave Robichaux books, right? Uh, he writes first person for Dave, and then third person for anything else that's going on. So if he's writing about Cleet in New Orleans, all of a sudden we jump to third person, but then he comes back to Dave in his first person. In this, you're first person in both. So how did that work, and why that particular decision?
I should say too, like not only are the present chapters with Astrid first person present, but also her flashback chapters are first person present because I was like, let's just do the dumbest thing possible here. No, it felt like a bit of a risk, right? Because Assassin's Anonymous, the first book, it follows Mark. It's first person present. This is a book about someone who is making amends, who's in a recovery program. I wanted it to have like kind of like a confessional, visceral feel to it. And so when it came to the second book, I kind of felt like I painted myself into a corner because I felt like if I then did third person with Astrid, I'm kind of like removing that confessional aspect from her. I'm
Okay.
removing her ability to kind of like speak a little bit more clearly to who she is and where she's at. And I also like, I mean, I just like first person present. I feel like again, it's a little bit more immediate. I think for a thriller, it works well. It just felt more natural for the voices. And it brought that challenge of making sure I can find that balance of like, Mark and Astrid have to sound different. They can't
Right.
sound the same. And
Right.
Mark is like a little bit goofier and a bit of a jokester, whereas Astrid's a little bit like angrier
Hmm.
and a little bit less verbose. But yeah, it was something that as I was doing it, I'm like, there's a halfway decent chance I'm going to give this to my editor, and she's just going to be mad at me. I don't necessarily know if this is going to work, but you know what? Like, she was on board with it. And a couple of the review, like, I know you're not supposed to read your reviews on Goodreads. I read my Goodreads reviews because I'm a glutton
Uh-huh.
for punishment. But a couple of people have outright said like this is surprising that this worked, and I'm like, cool, But but yeah, it just kind of felt like I didn't want to I didn't want to like Mark and Astrid are equally important to where they are and what they're doing. So I didn't want to make one feel like, a tag on.
Hmm.
And so the most important thing in terms of like actually writing it, what I try to keep in mind is something an editor told me years ago is when you're doing multiple protagonists or multiple POVs, they have to be in conversation with each other. And if you can if you can hit that flow where it feels like a conversation, even though they're not technically conversing, it can work. You just gotta hope and pray and put in the work.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. And then kind of piggybacking onto that similar concept, but every writer is so extraordinarily different. I was just talking about this actually a few days ago. Uh, and with the way that we prepare for books, right? Like
Yeah.
Elroy is famous for, his outlines being as long as his books, which is to me, that's amazing, but crazy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, there's other people who, and I can only assume he's saying this facetiously, but they asked James Lee Burke how you prepare for and start a book, and his answer was, I write the best sentence I can write, and then I follow it up with another one. And, obviously that's very different. And I know in my process when I write, I've got the next few scenes plotted out, and I have an idea of where it's going, but I don't have a thoroughly detailed outline. With something like this, you jump so much between Astrid's point of view and then Mark's point of view, and then past scenes. So it'll be like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, present. And then you're also in Beijing and Singapore and Sao Paulo and all over the world. So the preparation you must have done for this, uh, get into that a little bit. How did you plan kind of the narrative, but also the time frames and the jumping and the skipping from chapter to chapter?
I'm gonna be an asshole and say that I actually didn't put as much time and effort into that as I usually do.
Okay.
But I think it's because like this is my 10th book. So I finally gotten to a point where I can kind of like trust myself and trust the process a little bit. I mean, I'm definitely like I can't start a book until I have the end point, until I know like what the kind of like the final moment is, or at least the showdown moment is, because it's what's the moment of catharsis there? Like that's what I'm building toward. I'm building toward a character's moment of catharsis, and this is Astrid's book. It had to be Astrid's. Like where is she going? What does she have to get to? So going into it, I knew that I had a sort of rough idea. I knew that we were going to be dealing with flashbacks to show us how she got to where she is, like how she became a killer and how she kind of hit a rock bottom that took her away from that.
Hmm.
But I kind of I sketched it out pretty loosely. Like my outlines you previously have been more intense,
Hmm.
but I think I really refined my outlining process with The Warehouse and with Paradox Hotel, which were both like Paradox Hotel was a time travel book. Like that was hard. The
Right.
Warehouse was a speculative sci-fi, like big, complicated thing with like three POV characters.
Right.
So I think like I've just kind of refined my process enough to when it came to Assassins and Medusa Protocol, I can say, okay, I'm going to do some prep, but I don't need to do as much prep as usual. I can just kind of like trust my instincts on this and just go and see what happens.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Because yeah, it works and it's a lot of fun, but and like you mentioned, because it's your 10th book and because you have experience doing this in the past, I can see how that plays into it. Because if you haven't done this before, this seems like a real challenge as a
Yeah,
writer.
and to be clear, man, like I'm not saying that I know what I'm doing. I still assume everything I write is trash until someone tells me otherwise. I still get to that halfway point of drafting a book where I'm like, what am I doing? Like this is why does anyone put up with me? And sometimes I still the reviews are coming in for Medusa. People really seem to like it, and there's part of me, like that back part of my brain that's like they're just being nice. They don't want
Uh-huh.
to see they
Uh-huh.
don't want to see a grown man cry. That's all it is.
Right, right, right.
So it's like that kind of thing never goes away. But I do feel again like after years of sort of you know refining my process, I feel like I've got the blade fairly sharp at this point. You
Right,
know.
right. Excellent. So, so real quick, I want to ask you about the dedication in here.
Yeah.
Uh, and the dedication is to Todd. I learned it by watching you, and I assume I know who that Todd is. But why don't you elaborate a little bit and tell us what that means?
Yeah, sure. So that was Todd Robinson, the editor of Thuglit, who
Right.
he's one of my best friends. I see him all the time. Uh, yeah, Todd doesn't give himself enough credit for what he did for the crime fiction community because when he was starting out, when Thuglit, like back in its heyday, it published some of the first short stories from me, Jordan Harper, Sean Cosby, Hillary Davidson, all these people who sort of like worked their way up in the ranks
Mhm.
and became like big deal crime fiction writers. He's he saw their talent right at the jump, and he was such a great editor to work with, and he remains a great editor. Like there's been moments where like I keep an office space in Manhattan because sometimes I just need to like spend a day just really like focusing and getting my
Mhm.
work done. And
Mhm.
it's not too far away from the bar he works at. So usually I'll schedule my work days in Manhattan for the days that he's on shift because I'll spend the day working and I'll go get a drink. And there's been plenty of times where I'll sit there and I'll be like, man, I'm struggling over like this one story point and I'll explain it. And he'll be like, oh, just do this. And I'm like, God damn it. Like how do you do that? But yeah, he's such a brilliant writer. He's a brilliant editor. It was funny. I guess there was something in the water because Sean Cosby's new book, King of Ashes, is out, and Sean dedicated it to Todd as well. So we both have booked. There are two books this month coming out with dedications to Todd, which
Nice.
which makes me very happy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Our review actually has been compared to Thuglit by a couple people, and I am very grateful for that. I because it's done in a very complimentary way, and I appreciate the hell out of that. But Thuglit really was such a beacon for so many crime writers for a long time, and obviously it's not around anymore. But the I know that I have heard so many people, crime writers whom I respect quite a bit, just speak so fondly of Thuglit. At the time it was out, I never submitted anything. I never sent anything. I I was writing more poetry at the time. I read a lot
Yeah,
of poetry. three books of poetry out. So I was doing more of that at the time. So I don't have much personal experience with it, but I know from the way that so many writers that I know and respect talk about it and the reverence that they talk about not only the people that came out of that, um, but taught as well. So yeah, I was 98% sure that's what you meant, but I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, yeah. I'm in like a rarefied class. It's me and Jordan Harper are the only two writers Todd never rejected, which I just I wear like a feather in my cap. And I think me and Jordan were tied for like how many stories we had published. I think it was like five or six. So I
Gotcha.
keep on telling Jordan we should like fight it out or something, or like
Right.
do some kind of like final showdown or something.
Hmm.
But I'm sure if it's a physical confrontation, I'll win because I'm bigger than Jordan and I train in Muay Thai. If it's a writing competition, he's going to kick my ass because Jordan's like one of the best writers working today.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. All right, cool. So talk to me about influences that have impacted your writing over the years. Be they current writers or, obviously people from the past who are no longer around, but the Chandlers and the Hammets and the Thompsons and those guys. But what are some writers, past or present, that you really respect, admire, and whose work you think influences or has influenced yours?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I was doing a podcast yesterday where I was talking about this, but like I started reading Dean Koontz when I was like way too young. I
Hmm.
was in like the sixth or the seventh grade, and it was
Hmm.
my mom encouraging me to do this. That was weird of her to do that. But yeah, and there was something that always appealed to me about his stuff because he just writes weird books that you can't
Yes.
really peg down to any genre, which has always been kind of what I'm interested in. I'm less interested in the genre label and more
Got
interested in like how much fun can I have in this book and get away with it.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, I think Kuntz was really formative. Ray Bradbury, because when I was in high school, I read Fahrenheit 451, and I think that was the first moment that I was like, holy shit, books can do this. Like they can talk about things. And that was probably one of my like, formative moments of yeah, I'm gonna end up being a writer.
Hmm.
Um I got really into Chuck Palahniuk when I was in my, when I was in college. So when I was like 18, 19, 20, which really brought me into like a lot of writing craft stuff. But it also brought me to authors like Amy Hempel, who is, I just think, the most brilliant short story writer on the planet. Tom Spanbauer, who was a brilliant, brilliant literary writer. He passed away last year. I got to write an obituary for him in Writer's Digest, which is really cool because I got to study with him, and his health had been failing for a very long time. But like 13 years ago, I studied with him in his last in-person workshop in Portland, Oregon, and it was just a great experience. And then yeah, like there was a lot of crime fiction that really meant a lot to me. And there's the classics, obviously, like you said. There's Chandler, there's Hammett, there's Thompson.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of like Cornell Woolrich too.
Mhm. Sure.
But then when it came to the modern era, it was like Dwayne Swarzynski. I remember reading like his some of his earlier books, and I'm like, man, this is just fun.
Right.
And then like Ben Winters, he does like some really like he's another guy who's like, I'm just gonna do weird, interesting stuff, you
Yeah.
know. But that said, man, like I feel so blessed to be part of like a really you know, talented group of people. There was I want to say last week, but time is a construct right now. I don't remember
Mhm.
exactly, but like the Shade, the bar where Todd bartends at,
Yeah.
me, him, Sean Cosby, and Jordan Harper got together for a little like, we're just gonna sit and work for a little bit. We're all gonna
Mhm.
write, we're all gonna get some work done, and we're all gonna like and I love doing that because like we'll all be sitting there and then like it'll turn into a bullshit session where like someone's trying to figure something out or and it's like, man, like the amount of talent at this table is absurd. And like just to be a part of that, like that keeps me going. That pushes me, because like
Sure.
watching them do what they do. And the great thing is like we're not in competition with each other. Like I can't write what Sean writes. I can't write what Jordan writes. They
Right.
can't
Right.
write what I write. Like we all have very distinct points of view and voices. but to be able to kind of sit there, it's like this weird Voltron thing. It's like we get to put our creative energy together for a little
Right.
bit and sort of like ride off each other.
Right. And I hear you, by the way. I'm right there with you. I was around that age. I was read I got into Chandler really early for some reason. I was a early teen when I started reading Chandler. Not that I got all of it, but I enjoyed I enjoyed the as a prose stylist, he's just so much fun. But everything, I mean, at that time, everything by Kuntz and King, everything I read. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just how I grew up. And then between that and being a D&D nerd on the side, I mean, I think you're right. It as a writer, I think that's so telling because we do this thing where we get into I can't think of a writer who didn't get into reading when they were young. Like
Oh yeah.
it's just one of those things that comes with the territory. It's and like you said, it partly shapes what we end up becoming later, you know?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I gotta imagine, like, I never played Dungeons and Dragons until like 2 years ago, which is funny because I was such a dork growing up, and it seemed like something that would be really attractive to me. But my girlfriend arranged like having a DM come in and host a game for
Okay.
a bunch of people, and I was
That's
like,
cool.
oh my God, this is amazing. But I can see, like, man, like I wish I came to this earlier because just from a storytelling aspect, it's a
Yeah,
blast.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you got these, modules and everything, but what the Dungeon Master does with it, it can be so much fun. Yeah,
I was driving him nuts because I just kept on making chaos decisions at every
uh,
turn.
uh,
And for some reason they just kept on working out.
nice.
So it was like cool. Like I see how to play this game.
Right, right, totally. Okay, so quick question here, changing gears a little bit. You wrote a book, I believe it was 2017, if memory serves. You wrote a book with James Patterson. Yeah?
I did. Yeah.
So I'm gonna those people who watch the Pulpcast with some regularity will know that I have, from time to time, said things that are not particularly kind about James Patterson. But I also fully recognize that he sells more books in a week than we have since we opened. So what was that process like, and how did that how did that kind of how did that offer come to you to co-write a book with him, and then how was the actual process working with Patterson?
So I had been at a conference. I think it was at a BoucherCon, and I think like the first two or three Ash McKenna books had come out at that point, and they were small press books, but they were punching above their weight. They were getting good press. They were finding readers. I wasn't setting the world on fire, but they were making the rounds. And sitting at the bar talking to an editor from Hachette, I think it was Hachette, and he was like, "Hey, we're starting this program. Patterson wants starts doing like smaller books, like novella-sized books, like 30,000 words, called book shots.
Okay.
So we're looking for more writers. Would this be something we could toss your name in for?" And I kind of thought he was being nice because I was like, "Sure." I was like, "I wrote these small press like punk rock PI novels. Like,
Right.
no one like Patterson doesn't want me to work with them." And I didn't hear anything for like 3 months. And then one day I just get a phone call. They're like, "So you want to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Why not?"
Right. Totally.
And you know what? The money was good. It was 30,000 words. It was $30,000, which at the time, like that was, I was making like $2,000 a book in advances
Mhm.
at that point. So 30,000 and a go is like, okay, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
take that. Um, I didn't have any real direct contact with Patterson. Like I did get, I spoke to an editor about the pitches and sort of like building it out.
Okay.
And I did get notes back from him, and
Okay.
I will say his notes were solid. They were really really good. There were a couple in particular that I was like, oh shit, like I'm putting this in my toolbox. This is solid. Um, and look, like I'm not gonna sit here and tell you like where to land on the subject. I will defend Patterson for a couple of reasons. The first is because the guy does give a ton of money to bookstores and a ton of opportunities to writers,
He does.
like me who were starting out and needed the money. But also in terms of the economics of books, and maybe the way it's been explained to me, and maybe this is right, maybe this is wrong, but it's like, Patterson sells so many books
Right.
and makes so much money for his publishers that they can then go out and take risks on new authors, or they can back like a mid-list author who's got another book out. So it's like he's literally the tide that's racing all the other ships.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Which, if it's and his books aren't everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. Like what I found in the books of his that I read, I was like, oh, this is like a solid episode of Law and Order. It's sort of like this. It does its job. It's not lighting the world on fire, but like every now and again, I just need to sit down and watch some Law and Order.
Yeah.
Just to clear my head a little
And
bit.
and quite frankly, the Alex Cross character is fun. Um,
Yeah,
he really is. So yeah, and you're absolutely right. That he has been known to give opportunities to a bunch of young writers, which is awesome. And and like you said, Rob, I think there are like, I mean, I've only been in this publishing thing for a few years, but I swear sometimes it feels like there is about 5 to 10 authors keeping the entire industry afloat.
that's publishing is a dumb model. The whole
Yeah.
model is dumb, and it doesn't make any sense. But I was glad to hear you say that. Like, yeah, I think there's a level of realization that I would love to see more people have, which is like, you know what, I may not like. I may not like the Twilight books. Like, I read the first Twilight book. I feel like
No,
those books are worth reading just to kind of understand what it is that's connecting with readers. But it's like, you know what? Even if I don't like it, Stephanie Meyer, she has sold way more books than I have, so she knows something about the world that I don't.
for
I
sure.
recently, well, not recently. It was like last year, but I went to my local Barnes and Noble, where I'm friends with the manager because I do a lot of events there, and I'm constantly popping in. And I bought a Colleen Hoover book, and she kind of looked at me and she starts laughing. She's like, "Seriously?" I'm like, "She has her own kiosk at the airport bookstore, and I would like to understand why."
Hmm.
And I read the book, and it was fine.
Hmm.
It's romance. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
it was entertaining. It was very readable. Like, I tore through the book in a couple of days. I can see what the appeal is, but when I made the jump from, I was writing the Ash books, which were small press, and then the jump to Warehouse, which was like, I mean, they paid me $500,000 for that book. That was ridiculous. It was absolutely absurd. And I will never see that kind of money for a book again because it didn't perform to expectations, which, different story. But one of the things I did before writing The Warehouse was I kind of committed to reading authors like Patterson and Michael Connolly and Lee Child, and
Mhm.
because I was like, I want to understand how they
Mhm.
do what they do. Like what is it about these books that are so eminently readable?
Right.
And like it's the same way like that I think all authors should build their process is you look at what someone else is doing and you say, okay, this part of their process works for me, and I'm going to steal this. This part doesn't, so just gonna get rid of it. And I would say the time that I spent kind of studying like upmarket thrillers and really really commercial fiction, I'm glad I did it because I feel like I walked away with some new tools in my toolbox.
Yeah, I absolutely will fully admit to if we're talking, guilty pleasure, I actually like the Lee Child books quite a bit. The Reacher novels. They're fun.
See, that's interesting. I couldn't really get into them.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. For whatever
Yeah.
reason, that particular one, uh I have a blast with those. And I think the character's so much fun because, he's a homeless vet essentially. His nickname in the book world is Sherlock Homeless. And that's kind of fitting. So, but yeah, it's true. I mean, you do need to, like you said, most of the authors that I really like and read a lot of tend to be smaller authors, indie authors, stuff like that. Tend to be. I love King too. So, but you do need to read, like you said. I've read a number of Patterson, Alex Cross books. I've read, a bunch of Lee Child books. And it is important because you you can get something out of almost anything, you
Oh
know?
yeah.
As a
Yeah.
writer for your toolbox and ideas you can use, angles that they take at certain scenes and stuff, and you go, okay, that's an interesting way to do it, So there's how often, Rob, have you read a book and thought, wow, that was a waste of time?
I mean, look, like there's been books I've started and I haven't finished,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and that's when you hit a point where it feels like too much of a chore to go back to it.
Mhm.
But even then, you're kind of walking away with like, okay, like there were things there that didn't work, and maybe I kind of see what wasn't working about it, you know. And I do a lot of like freelance editorial work, so there's always that little part of my brain that's going like, what works and what doesn't. But yeah, man, I mean, it's all just a learning process.
Yep. Yep. So so talk to me. You've had a really kind of varied career in a way, I guess, right? Because you started out as a journalist and then you were doing a little bit of work in politics. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and then obviously you've also been a writer, but you've been an editor. Correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah.
And so what are some looking back over that? Looking back at what about 25 years of that, right?
Pretty much, yeah. Jesus.
Yeah. Okay. So looking back on those 25 years, what are some lessons that you've kind of would take out from the journey that you've been on?
I mean, it's funny. I have like a really high level of executive function as artists go,
Uh-huh.
which my girlfriend, who is a poet, likes to point out frequently as she is like struggling to remember to do things.
Uh-huh.
Um, but that's a trauma response, from my time as a journalist and my time in politics, because I was in these very, high pressure, high stress fields
Sure.
where, if someone had to ask for something, it was too late. You should have thought of that. You should have had it ready 10 minutes ago.
Gotcha.
Um, there were a lot of things I took from that. Like it made me good at hitting deadlines.
Well, that.
Journalism made me really good at research and made me really good at talking to people. My degree is in journalism. So like, you give me a subject and I'll figure it out, pretty quickly. You ask me for an obscure piece of information, I'll find it for you. You ask me to sit down and interview somebody, like I'll have them like telling me their life story in 5 minutes. Like those those are things that really, really, really are helpful as a fiction writer.
Sure.
And then in general, yeah, I developed this ability to like constantly be panicked and always stressing about my work. So that's really helped me in terms of just being prolific and being efficient and hitting deadlines and all that stuff. And I the goal had always been to write fiction, but I got into journalism because I was like, well, a creative writing degree, that's not really going to get me a job. Journalism will get me a job, and I can work on
Sure.
the fiction on the side. And I got into politics because it was around the time that journalism really like the signs started coming out that
Right.
this
Right.
profession is cratering, and I was like, time to jump ship. And yeah, I eventually I got out of politics just because I realized I can't do this and write because I'm working 24/7, and I ended up taking a job at Mysterious Press, which was great because it was I was stepping down. I was taking a smaller role at a small company, and it was a fairly big pay cut for me. But I was like, I
Mhm.
don't care. Like,
Mhm.
if I don't do this now, I'll never be able to finish a book. And it ended up paying off because now I'm a full-time writer. So
Which is awesome.
it
Yeah.
is it is it is the best life there is, man. Like I get to sit around all day in a tank top and shorts, like eating Cheez-Its and drinking Diet Coke and making stuff up. And then I go pick up my daughter from school and we just hang out and have a good time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, what helped me on that front, and I completely understand where you're coming from, is when I was in the MPW program at USC, uh, that's you mentioned deadlines. We had to bring in whatever class it was. We had to bring in a story or an act from a play or a certain number of poems every week. Like that was deadline was every week, and you had to get it done. And that I feel like helped prepare me so much because it's so easy to, as a writer, to sit around and go, oh, I'll just finish it when motivation strikes me. You know,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's more about just putting the work in, because you have to get it done, as opposed to there's an old Philip Roth quote that I'm going to mangle when I paraphrase it, but he said something along the lines of um, a few of us wait for motivation, the rest of us just get to work, and there is something to that, and I think that's one advantage, at least, to some of these MFA programs out there, because they do put you under deadlines all the time, and then also obviously in journalism. I mean, I can't imagine the stress there is to get those pieces done on time and competently.
Well, that's the thing. It's there's no option B. You know, like you do it, you get it done, or else you find a new job. There was I remember one night I was doing the cop and fire radio, and so there was like this big fire. I had to go out and cover it. I come back, and it's the page one story because it was
Oh,
a fairly significant event. And I'm sitting there and I'm typing away and I'm trying to get it done. And it's like 10 minutes until they go to press. And my editor just stands over me and he raises his fist. He's like, if you don't get this in by the deadline, I'm going to punch you in the face. And he just stood there like that. And I'm like, cool, man. I love you, bud. Um, but yeah, it's that's the thing. I guess I was lucky in the sense that I was kind of hammered into this shape that like I can't physically miss a deadline. Like it's not like give me more time. It's like, I don't know if I can make it. It's like I see the date and I'm like, well, that's the date.
yeah,
If I gotta stay up late and do something, I gotta stay up late. If I gotta cancel something, I gotta cancel something, but that's when it's due. And yeah, it's important to be able to do that because at the end of the
it
day,
is.
like
Yeah.
the work gets done or it doesn't. Like
Mhm.
I'm teaching in an MFA program right now, and I had a student who like whiffed a couple of deadlines, and I'm just starting at this. I'm just starting on the MFA level, so I'm trying to
Oh,
be sort of like pretty chill in the beginning, but like I want to get to a point where it's like if you don't get me something, it's a fail, like because if you can't do it in this setting,
hmm.
then you'll never do it in any
Right,
kind of professional setting.
right, right. So we're talking about the last 25 years, right, for you, and your career getting you from there to here. Obviously, where you are right now is fantastic, fantastic spot, which is, what just about every writer wants, to be honest, which is to be able to, live on his or her writing alone. If and I told you I was just out at Todd Goldberg's program this week speaking to the MFA students, and you said you're doing some of that as well. What is what is a piece of advice that you would give to, I don't even want to say a young writer, they don't have to be young, but an aspiring writer who hasn't published much yet and things like that. What's a piece of advice that you can look back on, the last couple of decades and go, oh, I wish I had done that differently, or something that you learned that would have been helpful.
There are two things I tend to go back to. The first is something Amy Hempel told me, and just holds so completely true. She told me once that the biggest mistake that young or new writers make is wanting to publish more than wanting to write well. And I think that's, and I see that and I feel that. It's
Yeah,
like, you pick up this art and you want to see something realized and see something out in the world that you could show people, but it takes really, really long time to do that.
it does.
And that's how we end up with vanity presses or with self-published books that are not necessarily ready for prime time
Right.
or sort of smaller presses that are just putting out whatever, and then the work is kind of like inferior. It's tough. So I think patience is a humongous virtue. And the other thing is really just Jesus, I had this in my head. Just to say, it's about process, and this is something I see a lot too, where everyone's process is unique. It's like a fingerprint, and you have to build your own, and it changes over time. And that's why I say like if something I said resonates with you and you want to use it, like please take it.
Mhm. Mhm.
But if I say something and you try and it doesn't work, just because I've been like moderately successful doesn't mean that you have to do it. It doesn't mean that that's the pathway. And I think people get stuck in this idea of like, well, there's a certain way you have to do things, and it's like it's not true.
Mhm.
The example I like to use is that saying that if you want to be a professional writer, you have to write every day, right?
Mhm.
And that's it's bullshit. I don't write every day, and I
Mhm.
literally do this for a living because you know what? There are some days where like my daughter doesn't have school, and I'm like, let's go to a water park
Right.
because why not? Because we can do that. There are days where like I'm just exhausted and I don't want to deal, so I'm like I'm just gonna watch shitty movies, or I'm gonna go.
Totally.
I'm gonna go do a couple of Muay Thai classes, or I'm gonna go wander around Manhattan for the entire day listening to music. Like, who cares?
Mhm.
The only thing that matters is that the work gets done. But because I've literally had people come to me and say like, oh, I would love to be a writer, but they say you have to write every day, and I can't because like this person in my life is sick, or my job is really demanding, or this or that. And it's like it doesn't matter. Like the work just has to get done. It can get
Mhm.
done when it gets done.
Mhm.
So I think people psych themselves out when they think that like
Mhm.
there's a certain rule set they have to follow when like there are literally no rules.
Right.
The only
Right.
rule
Totally.
is when Elmore Leonard said that you can only use three exclamation points per 100,000 words
Right.
of prose.
I remember that.
That's a rule. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's a rule that I will stick by. Nothing else. Nothing else. You can make anything work. You can make anything sound good. You can make anything part of your process. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter as long as the work gets done. So
Yeah.
it's just it bums me out when I see people limiting themselves because they think there's only one way to do things.
Right. Oh, totally. And it is interesting too because I run into people as well, that, oh, I always wanted to be a writer. They say that, and at the end of the day, and I know, and most of you guys out there know too. Uh, it's not really about wanting to be a writer. It's either you write or you don't write. Like it's not, there's not really a gray area in there. The fact of the matter is, if you get the work done, you're a writer.
Yeah,
Even if it doesn't get published, you're a writer. Whereas if you sit there and want to write a novel, that's a very different thing, right?
yeah, yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
it.
no, it's the motivation is hard, man, and it's like there are so many setbacks,
Oh,
and
no.
that's one of the things that I've been trying to do a little bit more recently is talk about like a little bit more in depth about my successes in terms of like what I've been paid and how that stuff has looked, but also like the things that I failed at and the things that didn't go right because social media kind of fucks us up because people look at it and they go, oh look, all I see are deal memos and variety articles and all this
Right.
stuff. And it's like, man, for every one of those that I've had like 10 failures, and I
Mhm.
just decided to keep going. And I think it's important to note that because I think, someone runs into a wall and they're like, well, it's just me. I'm the only one who's struggling at this, so obviously I'm not cut out for it. It's like, no, man, everyone is struggling.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone is a giant ball of insecurity, and
Yeah.
everyone is just like terrified and afraid that like everything they write is going to be the last thing that they ever write, and that they ran out of words and that there are
Mhm.
none left. That
Mhm.
feeling never goes away.
Mhm.
It's when I tell my students that I see the relief. They're like, you're still
Sure.
scared? I'm like, yeah, of course I'm still scared. And they're like, oh, thank God,
Yeah, yeah. No,
because they realize like it's not just me,
right,
you know.
right. So you said one thing there that I thought was really interesting because and you may know this already or else it may slightly break your brain. I'm not sure which, but the we belong to the CLMP, which is the Community of Literary Magazines and Presses, right? And
Yeah,
so in that we get kind of group emails, right? And so one of the things you said was that the thing that we all have as artists in general, is that individual, unique thumbprint, right?
yeah.
That we put on something, whatever it is. Uh, and I get these email chains, and it is unbelievable to me how many submissions Litmags get that are plagiarized. That is so strange to me. Like because you said before, which was a great point, by the way, when you said, focus on the writing aspect, not the publishing, right?
Yeah.
And and I can't imagine how desperate you have to feel as a writer, as an artist in anything, to use somebody else's work and try to pass it off as your own. Like that is so stunning to me. I the first few emails I was reading, I was like, this can't be real because we're starting to see it a little bit in the AI fields too, which
Yeah.
is unfortunate. So, but you know, there are literally, Rob, there are databases that they're keeping of all these names of people who submit plagiarized work, like a story that was written in 1997. It's already been published, and now I'm going to put my name on it and try to get it published. That's so weird to me.
It's yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, first off, all AI is technically plagiarism. Anyone using AI because it's just built, it's a plagiarism machine. That's all it
It
is.
is.
It Frankenstein's a bunch of things together. It doesn't create. Um, but yeah, man, I don't know. I don't know. I think that there's a certain kind of person who wants to be perceived a certain way than actually do the work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, is it
There's,
that important for you to say, look, mom and dad, I got this published? Even though
I
it's not
guess,
mine?
I
I mean,
mean,
I just, that just dumbfounds me. Yeah.
do you remember years ago there was QR Markham? There was this whole big thing. Mulholland put his book out. It
Uh-huh.
was called like a Quantum of Secrets or something. I
Uh-huh.
have a copy, a signed copy, because I was at his event before the news broke. But he wrote this thriller novel that got published by Mulholland, reputable press,
Hmm.
and it turned out a lot of the book was plagiarized from like it was cobbled together from like James Bond novels and all this other stuff, and it was weird. Just because I remember really like thinking after that event, and I'm like, on one hand, like it was reprehensible to me because I'm like, you didn't do the work,
Right.
like you stole this. But the other part of me, who I was a baby writer then. I don't even remember if my first book had come out by then, and
Uh-huh.
I'm not saying that I understood it, but it was like, well, but he was sitting up where I wanted to sit, up at the front of the room talking about a book with a bunch of other authors and getting all this praise and all this acclaim and all this stuff. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just that attention is a hell of a drug, and
Yeah,
it's like
maybe.
getting attention in any form is just kind of worth it. So, but there's also there's that quote. I don't know who originally said it, but it's like, a lot of people they want to have written something rather than be a writer.
Sure.
It's kind of something like that. It's like because the writing part is hard. It's like, but when you have
Hmm.
a finished product, it's really gratifying. And some people want to skip right to the gratifying phase
Yeah.
without all like the self-flagellation it takes to get there. So,
Yeah. And
but
and
yeah,
and
man,
that
that's
and that Rob, sorry, that applies to any industry. Like
oh yeah.
there's always those people, in anything. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
In
look, like
this
influencers
topsy
on social media. It's like,
turvy
there are some people like
world.
my partner Sin is a she's a tarot reader, and she has like, 100,000 followers on TikTok, and she does a daily show. And so it's cool because like TikTok is now like working with her to sort of like expand her reach and her brand and stuff.
Mhm.
But the thing is she's providing a service. Like she's incredibly talented at what she does. She has a really engaged audience. She teaches, she talks about spirituality. It's all these really, really cool things. But that kind of like, but then looking at like other influencers, it's like, what do you do? And it's wild. Like you'll have some asshole with 1 million followers because he
Mhm.
like, flips cups or something or runs into walls. And it's just like, I don't get this fucking world sometimes, man.
Yeah. Yes. The social media world is a bizarre one. That's for sure.
Yeah.
There's not there certainly from my perspective anyway, there's not a whole lot of sense about what goes viral and what doesn't and why. The whys are even weirder. Like I just it's pretty weird. I mean, we do it because we're a label and we need to. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's I can't make sense of it, that's for sure.
Yeah, but when you turn your eye toward that, I think you see it a little bit more clearly. It's the people who are just desperate for attention. They'll do whatever it takes to get it,
Yeah.
And so I think in the context of the plagiarism, it's like I kind of get it, man. Like some people just want to be the center of attention, and they just they choose their pathway, and it's always the pathway of least resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the thing is that there's no coming back from something like that though, as an artist,
Oh
in
yeah,
that there really isn't. I mean, if it
yeah, yeah, yes and no. James Frey didn't plagiarize A Million Little Pieces, but like, man, I was so annoyed that he got like this big profile in the New York Times for his new book, and they're like, he was a literary outlaw. He punched a punching bag during our interview. He's masculine,
right.
and it's like, fuck that guy. Fuck that guy. I don't even, to be clear, I don't even care about the Million Little Pieces thing. I think that was a
Uh,
marketing issue where they just decided like we're going to sell it more as a memoir, and
yeah,
he
yeah.
got screwed in the process. What I don't like was that he created basically a sweatshop for authors in with Full Fathom 5, which was like designed to like make marketable books for paying the authors absolutely nothing,
Hmm.
and he made a mint from that. And it's like you're a bad person.
Yeah,
You're a bad person. You exploited other artists, and
gotcha.
now you're being hailed as you're a literary outlaw. Like, give me a
Right.
break.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I hear you on that. Yeah, I actually didn't know about that. I knew about the Million Little Pieces thing. I didn't know about that. So that's
Yeah,
huh.
if you wanna get angry, go look up Full Fathom Five and like what
Yeah.
their contract language was like. And yeah, like the New York Times just did this big profile on him for his new
Mhm.
book. And it's so dumb because he's like, well, now we don't know the difference between truth and lies anymore. So maybe this is James. And I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
Like,
Totally.
did you pay for this?
Totally.
Like, is that how you get into the Times now? Because this is way too glowing,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Yeah. All right. All right. So we're gonna shut this down here, Rob. So first off, this is Rob's new book. Comes out on June 24th, which means that by the time you're watching this, it'll be available. Okay. So
Cool.
uh, go to bookshop.org or wherever else you want to buy your books, your local bookshop, and pick up the Medusa Protocol. Also, just to plug ourselves real quick, this is our review, and it's literally coming out this week. So by the time you watch this, again, it will already be out. So you can go to our site or anywhere else and find that as well. Okay. Rob, it's been great having you on the show, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah,
Any
thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Okay, excellent. And everybody out there, I'll be seeing you soon.
In this top secret